everyone, I'm Rachel Wolfson, the host and founder of Web3 Deep Dive Podcast. Web3 Deep Dive Podcast focuses on real-world Web3 use cases to help you better understand how Web3 is being applied today and how it may be leveraged in the future. If this sounds interesting, I encourage you to subscribe, like, and share the content that you're seeing today to help spread the word about Web3. I'd also like to take the time to thank Web3 Deep Dive sponsors. Animoca Brands is sponsoring today's episode. As a worldwide industry leader in digital entertainment, blockchain, and digital property rights, Animoca Brands plays a key role in the future growth of Web3 and the open metaverse. With a portfolio of over 450 investments in products like the Sandbox, Phantom Galaxies, Life Beyond, and Mochaverse, Animoca Brands will keep building a better and fairer Web3 ecosystem, bringing true digital property rights to all internet users. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Web3 Deep Dive Podcast. I'm so excited for today's episode. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Don Tapscott. He's a best-selling author and the co-founder of the Blockchain Research Institute. Let's get right to today's episode. Hi, Don. How are you?
Hi, Rachel. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again. I'm so excited to be interviewing you today.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing what I have to say as well.
I'm looking forward to it as well. I'm sure our listeners are also looking forward to it. Before we get started, Don, I briefly introduced you, but I would like you to introduce yourself and let our listeners know how you've become involved in the Web3 space and what you've done so far.
Well, there's the very short version and the longer. Maybe I'll do a medium one. I'll only go back to 1978 when I was working at Canada's Bell Labs. And we had this crazy idea that everybody would use a computer and they'd be connected to a vast network of networks. And we did a whole bunch of research projects. I had an unlimited budget to travel around the world. I went to Stanford Research Institute, met Douglas Engelbart, who became a mentor. Of course, he was the father of all of this. And then based on that, I wrote a book. And my mother bought most of the copies. It was like a study in bad timing. But we said that computers were going to become a communications tool and everyone would use one. And back then, the only people who used computers were programmers. Now, I'm dating myself. I was right out of school at the time. And I wrote another stinker of a book. We set up a company to do consulting in the space before the space existed. We survived, did well. And in 93, I wrote Paradigm Shift, which is obviously a big book. And in 94, The Digital Economy, which is the first big book about the web. And there have been a bunch since then. And during this whole period, I've been doing what we call syndicated research projects, where you get a whole bunch of companies and governments together. They each kick in some money. It can be $100K up to $300K. You have a few $1 million, and you can really figure something out. So I was doing a project on new models of governing resources, and we were looking into Bitcoins in 2014. And on a father-son ski trip with Alex, over a large bottle of wine, we started sharing notes, and he ended up writing a paper for us about governing Bitcoin. And my publisher got wind of it and said, is that a book? And so I asked Alex, you want to write a book? And he quit his big, fancy, high-paying investment banking job and worked with me for 6 months up here at our lake house, actually. And we wrote Blockchain Revolution. It turned out to be the big book on this topic. So to get to the end of the long answer here, we conducted 150 research projects as part of this institute that we created. And seeing as I'm here, a little known fact is when the book first came out, the whole blockchain, Bitcoin world was a bit of a mess. Bitcoin was about to blow up. There were a lot of misconceptions about this stuff. So we brought a whole bunch of leaders up here onto the lake, 3 hours north of Toronto, We had Joe Lubin, it was Brian Bellendorf from Hyperledger, and his boss, Jim Temlin, head of the Linux Foundation. We had a whole bunch, 15 people. And we created this thing called the Muskoka Group.org and adopted a set of principles on how to steward this resource forward. And we also decided to do a bunch of things. And one of them is we need better case study research and better research about what all this technology does. So we created the Blockchain Research Institute. We've done like $10 million of projects. We created all these online courses through Coursera and INSEAD. We've got 250,000 people now, 250,000 registrants for those things, and launched some big events and a whole bunch of other things. And naturally, this evolved over time into Web3, and that's kind of the language that we use and we talk about now.
Yeah. So I want to know what really piqued your interest in blockchain and in Bitcoin to begin with, because you've covered the technology space, for years, and then all of a sudden in 2014, you got interested in Bitcoin and blockchain. So what was it about the technology there that made you interested?
Well, I knew about this double spend problem that cryptographers have been trying to solve for a long time. One of the books I wrote, again, I'm dating myself, 96, I co-authored a book called Who Knows? Safeguarding Your Privacy in a Networked Age. And my mother came through with lots of purchases for that one too. But I started getting interested in the idea of digital cash back then in the mid-90s. And the leaders back then during that period. And the first time I heard about Bitcoin, I thought, is this the real thing? So I read the paper, and like many people, my head kind of exploded that Satoshi had solved the double spend problem. Being that, with the Internet of Information, if I send you a photograph, I'm actually not sending you the photograph, I'm sending you a copy. I keep the original. That works great for information, but it doesn't work well for assets, things of value that belong to somebody. And if I send you some money and you still, you get the money, but I still have a copy, that's not going to work. So what happened was, I thought, wow, could this be it? Is this the real thing? And we started looking into it, and then that's when I hooked up with Alex, and we started getting excited about it.
Mm-hmm. So a lot has changed since 2014. Are you still excited about blockchain technology?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the way we described it in the book, I think, is still valid, that this is part of the second era of the digital age. And I've kind of watched this. We've gone through mainframes, mini computers, PCs, the internet, the web, the mobile web, social media, the cloud, big data. And now we're entering into the second era where technology is infusing itself throughout everything, the physical world, billions and trillions of inert objects that not only are smart and can do transactions, but can learn. We have the rise of AI, and there's a whole evolution of that right now with generative AI. We have technology in our bodies, and we've got drones and robots and so on. And we came to the conclusion back then that the operating system for all of this would be a peer-to-peer network, and blockchain would be at the center of it. Now, the whole thing has gone through a big evolution, and it took a whole bunch of wrong turns, but it's still that the concept of that technology is unstoppable. I was just talking 2 days ago to the CIO of one of the biggest companies in America, a household word, and he said, I don't get all the cynicism, honestly. There's nothing that will stop this from happening. Regulators can't stop it. It's inevitable that this will happen. So,
do you mean blockchain technology?
Yeah, I'm talking. We were discussing blockchain at the time, but as part of a second era, you think about Web3 and really what that represents. And it's sort of like it's blockchain plus the concept of digitization of all assets, plus the concept of a new platform for the Internet of Things. When that light bulb there buys some power from a distributed power source and pays promptly, which enhances its reputation as a trustworthy device, and collectively that device and a whole bunch of other devices learn about how to manage the power grid better, that's not going to happen through the Visa network. You're going to need a distributed ledger type technology to do that. So, but it's also going to be the foundation of AI, inexorably. If it isn't, we're in big trouble. If AI is a big centralized thing running on some supercomputer or some quantum machine, that's the nightmare scenario that's shaping up. So we've done a lot of work on decentralized AI and how blockchain and AI intersect. I'll just introduce one other term. We haven't really talked about this publicly, but you're going to hear a lot more about it, because yet another Tapscott, my brother, Bob, is just finishing a book on this. The book is called Trivergance. And sure, there are a lot of technologies of the second era, but when all is said and done, you have three that are converging: AI, machine learning, neural networks. You have the Internet of Things, the physical world becoming animated and learning. And then you have Web3 and blockchain technology, which is the platform for all of this.
Mm-hmm. Trivergance. And you said he's writing a book on that?
Yeah, I'm sort of working with him on it, actually, and there are like 8 of 10 chapters in the can, and it should be out early next year. I don't know if it'll become a household word. Will it become, the singularity or something like that, the Trivergance? But I think it's a really cool concept. Mm-hmm. It's not a word in the dictionary. It just came out of a conversation with me and Bob.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
That's interesting. Okay. And then are you also writing a new book yourself?
I am.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about that? I'm curious to know what you're working on.
Well, just to flash back, in the digital economy, I was pretty upbeat about the web and about all this technology. And I said some things could go wrong. 7 potential big problems. All of them did. I said, the Internet's going to be wonderful, but I think if a small handful of companies capture our privacy or our data, that's going to undermine our privacy irrevocably. Check. If data, the asset class of the digital age, is owned by a small group, then you could see a bifurcation of wealth, with there being wealth creation, the economy growing, but the middle class stalled or shrinking. Check. I said, I think the Internet will bring us all together. But it could go the other way. We could have a fragmentation of public discourse where we all end up in our own little self-reinforcing echo chambers. Check. The purpose of information for a lot of people today is not to inform them, it's to give them comfort. And now with AI, get ready for serious, deep fakes and opportunities to create a false parallel kind of world that sucks a lot of people in. There were a whole bunch of these. I said I think that the Internet will create jobs, and as technology always has, Schumpeter, creative destruction. Great thing about capitalism, it blows away the old and creates something even better. Well, that's happened, but now with this convergence of these 3 technologies, this Trivergence, I don't know, 48 of 50 states, the number 1 job type for men is truck driver. The number 1 job type for women is cashier. Well, both of those are gone in a decade, and it's not just that kind of, blue collar work, it's professional work. So all of these things are going down. And so I've come to the conclusion, and we've raised this back in Blockchain Revolution, and I'm pursuing this. Alex is pursuing Web3 and the opportunity. And as you probably heard or seen, his new book is a spectacular piece of work, comes out in September. But my whole focus is how do we turn this whole train that's kind of out of control around? And I've concluded, and this is the topic of the book, that we need a new social contract for the digital age. You know, when we went from the agrarian economy to an industrial economy, over years, decades, we built a social contract. We figured out people need to be literate, created the public education system, created a law, you have to go to school. You know, we created people, we figured people live in the city, so they're going to need a social safety net. And so we couldn't, and so we had to, you know, make some big changes in the way that governments operate and what they do. We figured that you know, you can't have one oil company owning all the oil. So we created anti-monopoly legislation and so on. We haven't done any of that. If you look at the writers' strike today, what's going down there is the writers and the actors now attempting to get one little piece of a new social contract for the digital age established, that you can't take my image and reuse it. You know, I end up working a day in my life, and then I get some minor residuals for that as you take my image and create a movie star or extend the movie star that I am. So there are many different aspects to the social contract, and they address many parts of society, but they address the kinds of problems that I identified back in 1994.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that you're writing about this, and I can't wait to read that book. When does it come out again?
Well, I'm just working now with trying to line up the right publisher.
Okay, got it. So I'll be on the lookout, and our listeners will also be on the lookout. But what's the solution with having a new social contract? I mean, is blockchain going to play a big role there? I mean, you mentioned the actors example. How does technology fit into all of this?
Well, that's a great ironic point, isn't it? That the second era of the digital age is causing us to rethink virtually everything. You know, our models of government and democracy, the deep structure and architecture of the corporation, how we orchestrate capability to create wealth, the relationship between government and their citizens. You know, the basic nature of the private sector in a so-called free market society, many fundamental things. So technology is causing us to do this, but ironically, the technology can be critical to the solution. So in any one of these many areas, that's what I'm talking about, is how technology can be part of the problem. I mean, what I just mentioned, democracy, okay? Right now, we have a crisis of legitimacy of our democratic institutions. There are few people who would disagree with that statement. And legitimacy is the concept that, you know, you may disagree with who's in power, but at least you think the system is a good one. Well, close to a majority of Americans think it's not a good system. I mean, you got a third of the people saying, we don't care about the results of election, we just want our guy in power. Mm-hmm. So, and there are many, many deep problems that have led to this crisis. A big one is that politicians are not beholden to citizens. They're beholden to the people who fund them. So Exhibit A is over 90% of Americans would like to see background checks for firearms. Congress can't pass a law saying that because it's not accountable to citizens, it's accountable to the people who funded their campaigns. And 3/4 of a congressman's time spent raising money. So why don't we create a Web3 based election system where you not only vote for the person, you vote for the program in a smart contract. You know, and you can, I remember Michael Casey way back was at one of our events many years ago, and someone said, Michael, what's smart money? And he gave a great example. He says, well, you send your kid to college and you give him some money and you hope that he spends it on books and tuition and not in the bar. or with wheat or something like that, and on wheat. And so he said, little Johnny goes off to university and he walks into the bar and orders a margarita. And the money says, sorry, Johnny, I don't do margaritas. I just do books and tuition. So why couldn't you have a smart contract that outlines the program that the politician runs on? And if they don't abide by their commitment to implement that program, then there are consequences. Maybe they're censured, maybe funds are cut off, maybe they're repealed. So that would be one of 100 examples on how this technology can help us solve these big social contract problems. And that would be an example of what we refer to as moving to a second era of the digital age. The first era was pretty good. I mean, we created these representative institutions, but democracy, that was better than kings and nobles running things. But there was a weak public mandate. Citizens were inert. There was opacity everywhere, and politicians are accountable to funders, not to citizens. Could we have a second era enabled by this technology where there's a culture of public deliberation, active citizenship, where there's transparency, so you know what's really going on, and where there's accountability to citizens built in through technology like smart contracts. So I'm trying really hard to make this whole book and this whole storyline not super negative. But I have to tell you, I'm very, very worried that the consequences of not making a right angle turn here are very, very severe. Well, climate change being the biggest example.
Right. Yeah. Climate change. It's about 105 degrees in Austin. Although, it's everywhere, because I feel like Phoenix is really getting hit hard where it's 118 degrees. So I shouldn't complain.
Well, Italy is literally on fire right now. And, I had a friend actually has a place up here in the lake. And about a decade ago, he says, climate change, it's not going to affect us in Canada. And two problems with that argument. One, if 1.5 billion people are losing the water supply somewhere else in the world, it's probably something we should care about. But secondly, I said, it will affect us. The carbon doesn't know about boundaries. And climate change doesn't know about these, borders that exist around countries. And sure enough, we have wildfires in Canada, the smoke from 1,000 miles from here is choking out New York. We have horrific problems with floods and all kinds of other things. So this is a situation where, again, we can use technology to solve this problem by creating Trivergance, AI, the Internet of Things, and blockchain, real-time monitoring and feedback systems that's part of a whole new reindustrialization of planet Earth. And to get to that, of course, it's going to be a real battle. We're going to have to mobilize the world. And that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, we've been mobilized before around world wars, but we were on different sides. We need to be mobilized and on the same side as well. And without technology, we're actually toast. So we need this blockchain and this technology, the digitization of assets and so on, like a carbon credit is an asset. We need to create liquid open markets for carbon on blockchain exchanges and platforms. Of course, there's a ton of that underway today, and we're involved in that.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because I agree, blockchain technology is so important, especially with the rise of AI, like you mentioned. I think that one of the real challenges is going to be regulatory clarity, because there's a lot of confusion still. When people hear blockchain, they think of FTX, they think of cryptocurrency. And so although it's such a useful technology, we really need to clarify what it can do, and that it's not associated with these exchanges that have gone under I think that's a real challenge. Just education.
Well, that's one of the two reasons that we exist. And we're just trying to clear mud off the windshield. We're publishing all this stuff. It was all proprietary to the people who funded it, our members. And now, with their encouragement, we've released most of it under a Creative Commons license. So anyone can go there and use it. And we have the biggest education programs in the world now through INSEADS, currently the #1 business school in the world, and Coursera. So when Alex and I are out on the road and speaking, to big audiences and stuff like that, but it's a real problem. And, Rachel, I've seen this before because I've been through a few iterations. And when I was at Bell, people said, managers using computers? I don't think so, Don. Do I look like a secretary to you? It was like almost 10 years. I was trying to say, no, really, it's okay to use a computer. Typing is not a terrible thing. You can learn to type. It's fun. I mean, it was ridiculous. When the internet first came out, still got all this flack. With the crash of the dot-coms for the internet of information, nobody wanted to talk to us for a couple of years, and that's kind of, we're having a similar moment now with the whole blockchain Web3 crypto world. But sometimes these forces are just unstoppable, and you have to have the big long-term picture, and then contribute the best that you can. People ask me, well, how's it all going to end out? And I'm sure you've heard me say, and Alex too, that hey, the future is not something to be predicted. The future is something to be achieved, and we're kind of in the business of trying to achieve a reasonable and helpful future.
Right.
I think Web3, and again, not to overstate it, but Alex's book can help change the whole conversation around this stuff. And that may be its biggest contribution. Blockchain Revolution did that. When we wrote that book, there was nothing really. It was just about Bitcoin. And we said, no, it's not just about Bitcoin. This underlying technology is a really big deal, and it can be used in every industry, and it's part of a second era of the digital age. And now with the Web3 book, I think the whole conversation about crypto and bad actors and all the rest, which typically you get, there were criminals all over the place in '95 when the web became popular. The #1 application was porn, probably still is. It's a typical thing because bad actors and criminals are typically the first ones to adopt an exciting new technology. And a lot of it is just inexperience too, and hubris. People believe their own BS. They get kind of too carried away. But over time, I'm a believer, and I may be naive, that the truth will out. That if you just keep at it long enough, and if people, mobilize, and that's kind of what we're all trying to do here, and bring our legitimate expectations about the technology and the understandings that we do have about what it can do. If we bring all that to the table, then maybe this smaller, smarter world that my grandchildren inherit might actually be a better one, and where we don't have these kinds of ridiculous conversations that we have today.
Right. Well, that's why I'm still in the industry. I've been in it since 2017, and we've met at a number of conferences from the very beginning that I entered the space. And, people, they wonder, why am I not writing about AI? Or, AI is interesting, obviously, but blockchain is my expertise, and I'm in it because I believe in it. And I don't believe, people are like, oh, blockchain, it doesn't matter anymore. It's like, actually it does. That's why I have this podcast.
Yeah.
Education is key.
Yeah, and you're playing a key role. With the rise of ChatGPT, AI did make this big turn from being, some tools for analyzing data and making sense and predictions of things to becoming a tool for actually generating new content. And I was just talking to my agent, my book publishing agent, and also my speaking agent, and he said, boy, when that thing came out, the demand for AI speakers was right off the charts. He says, now it's kind of settled down. And he says, I think maybe it was just like, I didn't use the word fad, but it was kind of like a little exuberance. And now people are standing back and trying to figure out, well, AI, it's so important, but how does it fit in with everything else? That's why this Trivergance concept is kind of important.
Definitely, because like you just said, AI, blockchain, machine learning, all of that is playing a key role in this second era of the digital revolution that you know you mentioned. So it's important for everyone to remember that.
I think another thing happened too, that there is this view of blockchain, it didn't really work, did it? I mean, there was all this excitement about Walmart working with IBM around avocados 7 years ago and 6 years ago, and a lot of it's really gone nowhere. And like every statement, there may be a kernel of truth there, but the problem wasn't blockchain or the technology. The problem was the whole concept of what to do. And this is a very important thing that I want to share with the people watching this. And again, because I'm been around, I do have a little perspective. In around the mid-90s, when the web became a big deal, people were saying, well, the internet, I don't know, it's like not secure, it's not enterprise ready, it's full of crime and porn and all this other stuff. So what we're going to do is use this HTML type technology, and we'll build internal proprietary permissioned intranets, and we will call them intranets. So during that period, there was this whole shift from the internet, to intranets. They're the real things that enterprises can use. Of course, over time, as the public infrastructure became more robust, everybody dropped those things. We have a similar thing that happened with blockchain. During a period of several years, everyone was out there implementing proprietary permissioned blockchains. And if you needed to hook up with other enterprises, you created consortia to do that, which were just a nightmare in negotiating, because you have to reinvent the wheel and negotiate all these different standards and protocols and ways of interacting and so on. Well, you don't have to do that now, because these new platforms, just Ethereum being the biggest one, but with Polygon, there are other, platforms that are becoming robust. Polygon, Cardano. I mean, we've always thought that Cosmos had a really important role to play as the internet of blockchains. And these things are now, the big companies that we work with, they're now taking a second look at all this and thinking, gee, if we could use a public infrastructure to do this kind of stuff, that could be radical. And it will be radical, as we've written about. I mean, this software, and especially if you think of it, blockchain, in the Trivergance concept, that can replace everything banks do. And Alex has been very articulate talking about, here are the 8 things that banks do. They move value, they store value, they exchange value, and so on. You actually don't need a bank, in theory. Now, the banks aren't going to go away, but and that's just one industry. We're talking about a massive disruption here. And it could be for the good. I mean, take something like supply chains. We've had trouble getting baby formula. We had trouble getting children's Tylenol in the last year. And how can this be in 2023? And if you think about our supply chains, they're kind of like spaghetti, aren't they? You got trains and boats and planes and trucks and pipelines and all these different parties and actors working together with all these different deals and arrangements and information is moving around through phone calls and faxes and paper and traditional systems like ERP, and you got borders and escrow, middlemen and tax authorities. What if that were all a shared network state? Yeah. What if there was a single version of the truth? What if we could have real-time transactions? No 3-day delay, because the payment and the settlement's the same thing. What if we could have smart money, smart payments based in smart contracts? This is how we're going to build a supply chain that will last us for a century going forward. And that's unstoppable in my mind. Anything that is in the way of that right now is what you can call an implementation challenge. It's not a reason why this will not happen. You always have to put these problems that we're all facing in one of those two boxes. Reasons why blockchain's a bad idea or implementation challenges. And everything that I've seen is in box number 2. So, excuse a little rant there, but this is still happening. It's just happening in a different way than people thought it would.
Yeah, definitely. When you were talking about blockchain being used in the real world, it made me think of Paul Brody's new book, Ethereum for Business. That's also a great book. I need to read Alex's book because he just sent it to me and I got it in the mail. But I just finished Paul Brody's book. It's amazing.
Well, Alex, you may have got the small book Alex did called The Digital Asset Revolution, which is a beautiful book. But Web3, Charting the Internet's Next Economic and Cultural Frontier, comes out September 19th.
Cool. Okay, Don, we're going to wrap things up here. So I just want to get any final thoughts from you that you want to share with the listeners before we say goodbye.
Well, let me share some clarity on these books, if I can, because we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars creating these assets. So Blockchain Revolution came out in 2016. Big book, 19 languages, blah, blah, blah. And since then, the BRI has published several small books containing our research. Not small in terms of size, but in terms of our target market. And they include the financial services revolution, the supply chain revolution, the platform revolution, and the digital asset revolution. Maybe we can I'll send you a screenshot of those books.
That'd be amazing. We could put them up here.
However, September 19th, Web3, Charting the Internet's Next Economic and Cultural Frontier comes out. That's Alex's book. So this is the first major thing since Blockchain Revolution in 2016. It's targeted at the New York Times list, and it'll be a big deal. And we're very hopeful that it will clear a lot of mud off the windshield about this technology. He's now, going to be presenting these ideas at TED, actual TED Tech in London. And I think, my TED Talk was watched by 100 billion people. No,
that's amazing.
It's like the big video on this topic. And so we're all geared up. That's what we're doing right now, is getting all fired up to make sure that this book becomes a household sort of word. But you won't. He may send you an advance copy, but Amazon unleashes the floodgates September 19th. Of course, you can pre-order it.
I was going to say, so our listeners can pre-order the book on Amazon?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll have it linked in the show notes.
Terrific.
Great. Well, Don, it's been a real pleasure. It's always so great speaking with you. It's been way too long since we've last caught up, so I'm glad we had this conversation. If our listeners want to get in touch with you, how should they do that?
Well,
Twitter?
Twitter's good. I'm at D Tapscott. Don't go to me on LinkedIn because I have like 800,000 followers and I get floods of stuff every day and I just can't deal with it. And then you could info at Tapscott If you send me a thing there, I will communicate with you and give you privately my personal contact information.
Awesome. Great. Well, Don, thanks again for joining us on Web3 Deep Dive, and we'll see you next time.